The crystal chandelier cast 1,000 diamonds of light across the grand ballroom of the Sheila Hotel as Victoria Hamilton's voice cut through the elegant murmur of Seoul's elite like a blade through silk. In the States, we call that money laundering. 200 guests in custom hanbok and Italian suits turned to stare at the Afro-American woman in burgundy silk, who had just committed social suicide. Her pearl necklace, 4 generations of Hamilton women's legacy, caught the light as she faced the man who could destroy her with a whisper. Kang Minho stood frozen, a crystal glass of untouched champagne suspended halfway to his lips. For 32 years, no one had dared challenge him publicly. His dark eyes, usually cold as winter steel, flickered with something unprecedented. Surprise. Ms. Hamilton. His voice remained dangerously calm, but Victoria caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Perhaps you misunderstand Korean business practices. I understand numbers. Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown. Your Apex Holdings acquired 6 failing companies in 18 months. Each bankruptcy conveniently cleared exactly $2.3 billion in debt. That's not business acumen. That's orchestration. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Minho's right hand, scarred across the knuckles from a past he'd buried, clenched imperceptibly. Behind him, Park Jun-sik touched his chest. A nervous tell Victoria's photographer's eye immediately catalogued. You're playing a dangerous game, Minho whispered, stepping into her space. This close, Victoria caught his scent, expensive cologne masking something darker. In Korea, we value respect. And in America, we value truth. Victoria's chin lifted defiantly. Your mother's cosmetics empire, your real estate ventures, your charity foundations, all perfectly positioned to clean money that smells like blood. Choi So-young's jade bracelet clinked as her hand flew to her throat. Matriarch Kang Hyejin's fan snapped shut with audible finality. Security guards in black suits began a subtle advance toward the confrontation. Minho's scar began to itch. It always did when his carefully constructed world threatened to crumble. This American woman with fire in her eyes had just spoken truths that could topple empires. Escort Ms. Hamilton to her room, he commanded, his voice deadly quiet. She's clearly overwhelmed by jet lag. But as 2 guards moved forward, Victoria smiled. The same fearless expression that had closed billion-dollar hotel deals across 3 continents. I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Kang. We're just getting started. The champagne glass slipped from Minho's fingers, shattering against the floor in a shower of crystal and consequence. In that moment, he realized Victoria Hamilton wasn't just another privileged tourist. She was the woman who could destroy everything he'd built, or become the salvation he'd never dared to dream possible. The question was, which would she choose? If the man who controlled Seoul's shadows had just met his match in an American heiress who feared nothing, would love be enough to redeem a heart stained with blood? Victoria Hamilton had attended 1,000 galas, but she'd never felt power this suffocating. The Sheila Hotel's ballroom thrummed with whispered Korean, each conversation a chess move in games she couldn't yet decipher. Her burgundy Valentino dress, chosen for confidence, not seduction, felt like armor against the curious stares following her every step. You shouldn't have come alone, James Hamilton had warned via video call from New York. Seoul society operates on relationships built over generations. You're walking into a maze blindfolded. Now, watching Korea's elite navigate social hierarchies with balletic precision, Victoria understood his concern. But the Hamilton Hotel Group needed Asian expansion, and she refused to send proxies to do work she could handle herself. Ms. Hamilton? A woman in powder blue hanbok approached with calculated grace. I'm Choi So-young. I studied at Columbia, class of 2015. Victoria accepted the offered hand, noting the serpentine intelligence in So Young's smile. Business administration? Psychology, actually. Much more useful in Korea. So Young's laugh held sharp edges. I've been curious about your passionate speech tonight. Kang Minho isn't accustomed to public challenges. Then maybe it's time he experienced something new. So Young's eyes glittered like black diamonds. You don't know what you've done, do you? Minho owns half of Seoul, and the other half owes him favors. Men like him don't forget slights. Men like him don't intimidate women like me. Before So Young could respond, the crowd parted like water. Kang Minho approached with predatory grace, his black Tom Ford suit fitted to perfection. Up close, Victoria noticed details her adrenaline had missed during their confrontation. The way he moved like violence contained in silk, the slight scar disappearing into his hairline, the wedding ring finger that remained suspiciously bare. Ms. Hamilton. His English carried only the faintest accent. Perhaps we could continue our discussion privately. It wasn't a request. Lead the way, Mr. Kang. He guided her through glass doors onto a terrace overlooking the Han River. Seoul stretched before them in rivers of neon and shadow, a city that never truly slept. Rain threatened in the heavy clouds above. You're either very brave or very foolish, Minho said, his back to the ballroom. In my experience, Americans often mistake the two. And in my experience, men who hide behind threats usually have something to hide. Victoria moved to stand beside him at the railing. Your financial records are public, Mr. Kang. I've spent 3 weeks studying them. 3 weeks. His smile held no warmth. How thorough. Thorough enough to know you're not just a CEO. You're something much more dangerous. Minho turned to face her fully. This close, Victoria could see gold flecks in his dark eyes, and something else. A loneliness so profound, it made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Dangerous men don't host charity galas, Ms. Hamilton. Dangerous men host charity galas to wash blood off their money. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Rain began to fall in gentle drops, speckling the stone terrace. You should return to America, Minho said finally. Seoul isn't safe for women who ask the wrong questions. Is that a threat? It's advice. I rarely give it twice. Victoria stepped closer, close enough to see her reflection in his eyes. I don't take advice from men who think money can buy silence. Something shifted in Minho's expression. Surprise, perhaps even admiration. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? For a heartbeat, his mask slipped entirely. Victoria glimpsed the man beneath the careful construction, scarred, tired, and desperately alone. Then his phone buzzed against his chest, and the vulnerability vanished. Enjoy your stay in Seoul, Ms. Hamilton, he said, stepping back into the ballroom. I hope it's brief. But as Victoria stood alone in the rain, she realized she'd just declared war on a man who might be the most fascinating enemy she'd ever encountered. Victoria's hotel suite at the Four Seasons felt like a gilded cage. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Seoul sprawled in organized chaos, ancient palaces shadowed by glass towers, tradition and modernity locked in eternal negotiation. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying every micro-expression from Minho's face during their terrace encounter. Her laptop screen glowed with financial documents spread across multiple tabs. Apex Holdings, Minho's flagship company, showed suspicious patterns that made her investigative instincts sing. Shell companies appearing and disappearing like smoke. Real estate transactions that lost money on paper, but somehow generated massive liquidity. A knock interrupted her analysis. Room service arrived with breakfast she hadn't ordered. Traditional Korean banchan arranged with artistic precision, plus a single red rose. The card read, "For the woman brave enough to speak truth to power. A concerned friend." Victoria's photographer's eye immediately cataloged details: expensive cardstock, masculine handwriting, ink that caught light like obsidian. This wasn't random admiration. Someone was watching her investigation. Her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Bukchon Hanak Village, 2 p.m. Come alone." Against every instinct her father had trained into her, Victoria found herself walking through Seoul's traditional district 3 hours later. Bukchon's preserved Hanak houses created an island of historical calm amid the city's modern urgency. Tourists wandered with cameras, but Victoria sensed she was being watched by eyes more calculating than curious. "Ms. Hamilton." She spun to find Park Jun-sik emerging from a tea house, his gray suit impeccable despite the afternoon heat. Minho's right-hand man carried himself with military precision, but Victoria caught the slight tremor in his hands as he approached. "Mr. Park, you're my mysterious correspondent. We need to talk." His English, though accented, carried authority. "About what you think you know regarding my employer." "I don't think I know. The question is what you're willing to tell me about it." Park gestured toward a secluded courtyard where traditional architecture created privacy from prying ears. They sat on wooden benches worn smooth by centuries of conversation. "Kang Minho isn't who you think he is," Park began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think he's a criminal using legitimate businesses to launder money for organized crime. Am I warm?" Park's hand unconsciously moved to his chest, the tell Victoria had noticed at the gala. "You're playing with forces beyond your comprehension. Then help me comprehend them." For a long moment, Park studied her face as if solving a complex equation. Minho's father was murdered when he was 19, shot 6 times outside a Busan warehouse. The official investigation concluded it was a robbery gone wrong. Victoria felt her pulse accelerate. "But you know differently." "I know many things I wish I could forget." Park's voice carried the weight of decades. The boy who inherited his father's empire had 2 choices: destroy it or become it. He chose to become it. He chose to survive it. There's a difference, though perhaps not one that matters to your investigation. Victoria leaned forward, sensing crucial information hovering just beyond reach. What about his mother? Does she know? Matriarch Kang knows her son isn't the businessman she raised him to be, but she's chosen willful blindness over unbearable truth. Park stood abruptly, as if the conversation had already cost him too much. "Go home, Ms. Hamilton. Seoul has enough ghosts without adding you to the collection. Why are you warning me? Shouldn't loyalty to Minho mean protecting his secrets?" Park paused, his back still turned. Sometimes protecting someone means saving them from themselves. As he walked away, Victoria realized she wasn't just investigating financial crimes anymore. She was unraveling the tragic architecture of a man who'd sacrificed his soul to protect the people he loved. But what she couldn't know was that across the city, in a penthouse office overlooking Gangnam, Minho was watching security footage of her conversation with Park, his scarred hand clenched into a fist as he realized the only man he trusted had just betrayed him for the American woman who was determined to destroy everything. The Hamilton Group's temporary Seoul office buzzed with controlled urgency as Victoria spread documents across the conference table. 3 weeks of investigation had yielded a paper trail that told a story of systematic corruption spanning 5 years. But it wasn't the financial evidence that made her hands shake. It was the photograph Park Jun-sik had slipped her during their second clandestine meeting. Black and white surveillance footage showed a younger Minho outside a warehouse, his face a mask of cold determination. In his hand, barely visible but unmistakable to Victoria's trained eye, was a gun. "Jesus," she whispered, sinking into her chair. Her assistant, Sarah, looked up from her laptop. "Find something significant?" Victoria quickly covered the photograph. "Just connecting some dots. Can you give me an hour of privacy?" Once alone, Victoria studied the image until her eyes burned. This wasn't the polished CEO who'd faced her at the gala. This was someone capable of violence, someone who'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Her phone buzzed. "Stop digging. Final warning." But Victoria's pulse spiked. Minho was monitoring her investigation, probably had been from the beginning. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it sent an unexpected thrill down her spine. She typed back, "Make me stop." Her phone stayed silent for 20 minutes. Then, "Lotus restaurant, 1 hour, come alone." Victoria stared at the message, every rational instinct screaming warnings. Meeting a potentially dangerous man in an isolated location violated every rule her father had taught her about business negotiations. But the photograph on her desk told a story that demanded answers, regardless of risk. The Lotus restaurant occupied a renovated hanok in Insadong, its traditional architecture a stark contrast to the modern city surrounding it. Victoria arrived to find the establishment mysteriously empty, except for Minho, who sat at a corner table like a king holding court in his private domain. "You cleared the entire restaurant," she observed, taking the seat across from him. "Privacy is valuable when discussing delicate matters." Minho's suit was charcoal gray today, his tie a shade of blue that matched Seoul's winter sky. "You received my message." "Several of them, actually. The threats are getting more specific." "Those weren't threats, Ms. Hamilton. They were warnings. There's a crucial difference." A server appeared with tea service, moving with the silent efficiency of someone accustomed to serving dangerous men. Victoria waited until they were alone again, before placing the photograph on the table between them. "Busan, 2018, she said. "You're carrying a weapon." Minho glanced at the image without reaction. "Surveillance photos can be misleading. Park Jun-sik says your father was murdered. That you inherited more than just business interests. Park Jun-sik talks too much." Minho's voice carried deadly calm, but Victoria caught the flicker of betrayal in his eyes. "What exactly do you want, Ms. Hamilton? Money? A business partnership? Or are you simply here to play journalist with someone else's tragedy?" "I want the truth." "The truth?" Minho laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "The truth is that naive American heiresses who dig too deeply into Korean business often disappear without explanation. The truth is that you're sitting across from a man who could end your investigation permanently with a single phone call." Victoria met his stare without flinching. "Is that what happened to your father? Someone made a phone call?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Minho's scarred hand curled into a fist on the white tablecloth. "My father trusted the wrong people," he said finally. "He believed that honor and integrity were sufficient armor against men who view both as weaknesses. His murder taught me that in this world, you either hold the knife or become its victim. So you chose to hold the knife. I chose to survive." Minho leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Every day, I make decisions that would horrify the boy I used to be. I've built an empire on foundations of blood and compromise. But that empire protects hundreds of families, employs thousands of workers, and keeps my mother safe in her beautiful illusion that her son is still the honorable man she raised." Victoria felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, but an unexpected tenderness for the man behind the monster's mask. "You could choose differently now." "Could I?" Minho's smile held infinite sadness. Once you've crossed certain lines, Ms. Hamilton, there's no path back to innocence. The blood on your hands doesn't wash clean, no matter how many charity galas you host or how much money you donate to orphanages. Everyone deserves redemption. Pretty American optimism. But some of us are too far gone for salvation. Victoria reached across the table, her fingers brushing his scarred hand. The contact sent electricity through both of them. Dangerous, undeniable, impossible. "I don't believe that," she whispered. For a heartbeat, Minho's mask slipped completely. Victoria saw the broken boy who'd lost his father, the young man who'd traded his soul for survival, the leader who carried the weight of everyone else's lives on his shoulders. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment like a gunshot. "What is it?" Minho answered, his voice immediately shifting to cold command. Victoria couldn't hear the response, but she watched his face transform from vulnerable to predatory in seconds. "Handle it. Quietly." He ended the call and stood, his business mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. "This conversation never happened, Ms. Hamilton. And if you're wise, you'll book a flight to New York tonight." "Why? What's changed?" Minho paused at the restaurant's entrance, his silhouette framed against Seoul's neon twilight. "Because someone just tried to kill Park Jun-sik. And now you're the only witness who can connect me to information that could start a war." As he disappeared into the city's shadows, Victoria realized her investigation had just evolved from dangerous to potentially fatal, and that the man she was falling for might be her only protection against forces that would kill to keep their secrets buried. Victoria's hands trembled as she dialed Park Jun-sik's number for the 5th time in an hour. Each call went straight to voicemail, and the fear that had been gnawing at her chest since Minho's revelation threatened to consume her entirely. Her hotel suite felt like a trap. Every shadow could hide an assassin, every sound in the hallway could herald her destruction. She'd photographed every document in her possession and uploaded them to a secure cloud server. But paper trails meant nothing if she died before exposing them. The knock on her door at 11 p.m. froze her blood. "Room service," a voice called in accented English. Victoria hadn't ordered room service. She approached the door carefully, peering through the peephole to see a hotel employee with a cart. But something about his posture, too alert, too watchful, screamed danger to her paranoid mind. Her phone buzzed. "Trust me. Back exit. Now. M." Without hesitation, Victoria grabbed her laptop and camera, slipping out through the suite's service entrance as she'd seen in countless spy films. The hotel's back corridors were dimly lit and eerily empty, but she followed signs toward the garage level. Minho waited by a black Mercedes, his usual polish replaced by urgent practicality. Jeans, dark sweater, leather jacket. He looked less like a CEO and more like the dangerous man she was beginning to understand he truly was. "Get in," he ordered, already scanning the garage for threats. "Where's Park?" "Alive. Barely." Minho pulled into Seoul traffic with practiced speed. 3 men with guns broke into his apartment 2 hours ago. He escaped through a bathroom window, but not before they made it clear they were looking for information about you. Victoria's chest tightened. "About me? Why?" "Because your investigation has attracted attention from people who make me look like a choir boy." Minho took a sharp turn into Gangnam's maze of side streets. There are organizations in Seoul that view foreign interference as a declaration of war. "Organizations like yours?" Minho's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "My organization protects its own interests through controlled violence. These people burn entire families to send messages." They drove in tense silence through Seoul's neon-lit arteries until Minho parked outside an unremarkable apartment building in Hongdae. He led her up 4 flights of stairs to a safe house that looked like any young professional's modest home, except for the security cameras and reinforced door locks. "You'll be safe here tonight," Minho said, activating an alarm system with military-grade sophistication. "My people will rotate guard shifts, and—" "Your people?" Victoria interrupted. "You mean your criminal organization is protecting me?" "My criminal organization is the only thing standing between you and a very painful death, Ms. Hamilton." The reality of her situation finally crashed over Victoria like a cold wave. She was trapped in Seoul, dependent on a man she'd tried to expose, surrounded by violence she didn't understand. The strong, independent woman who'd built a hotel empire was suddenly as helpless as a child. "Hey." Minho's voice softened as he watched her composure crack. "You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." "Why?" Victoria looked up at him, tears threatening despite her determination to stay strong. "Why protect me? I came here to destroy you." Minho stepped closer, his eyes reflecting something vulnerable and raw. "Because in 20 years of careful control, you're the first person who's made me remember who I used to be. I don't know who you used to be. Neither do I anymore. But when you challenged me at that gala, when you spoke about truth and justice like they still mattered, for just a moment, I remembered what it felt like to believe in something pure." Victoria felt the distance between them evaporating like morning mist. "Minho, you should hate me," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "Everything you've discovered about me is true. I've killed people, Victoria. I've ordered deaths and watched men beg for mercy I couldn't give. I'm exactly the monster you came to Seoul to expose. But you're also the man who cleared an entire restaurant just to explain yourself to me. The man who's risking his empire to keep me safe." Victoria's hand touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her palm. "You're not just a monster, Minho. You're a man who's forgotten how to be anything else." The kiss happened like lightning, sudden, inevitable, electric. Minho's hands tangled in her hair as Victoria pressed against him. Months of dangerous attraction exploding into desperate need. She tasted rain and regret on his lips, felt the tremor in his hands as he held her like she was both salvation and damnation. When they broke apart, both breathless, Victoria saw tears in his dark eyes. "I can't love you," he whispered against her forehead. "Men like me don't get happy endings. Maybe it's time you stop deciding what you deserve." Minho pulled away, his mask sliding back into place with visible effort. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow I'll arrange safe transport back to America." "I'm not leaving." "Victoria, I'm not leaving you to face this alone." Something broke in Minho's expression. For just a moment, Victoria glimpsed the boy who'd lost his father, the man who'd carried impossible burdens in solitude for so long he'd forgotten what trust felt like. Then his phone buzzed with an urgent text that made his face go pale. "What is it?" Victoria asked. Minho stared at the message, his jaw clenching with barely contained fury. "Someone just sent photos of our kiss to every major news outlet in Seoul. By morning, your face will be on every gossip site in Korea as the foreign woman who seduced the untouchable Kang Minho." Victoria felt ice form in her veins. "What does that mean?" "It means," Minho said, his voice deadly quiet, "that someone is using our relationship to destroy both of us. And they've just made the most dangerous mistake of their lives." As Seoul's lights twinkled beyond the safe house windows, Victoria realized that falling in love with Minho hadn't just complicated her investigation, It had made her a target in a war she was only beginning to understand. The photographs hit Soul's gossip sites like napalm. Victoria stared at her laptop screen in horror as images of her kiss with Minho spread across social media with viral intensity. Hamilton Harris seduces Korean chaebol. Topped trending searches, while comment sections exploded with speculation about the mysterious American woman who'd captured Seoul's most eligible bachelor. "Turn it off," Minho ordered from across the safe house's kitchen table, where he coordinated damage control through a series of increasingly tense phone calls. Reading the comments won't help. But Victoria couldn't look away. The photos were artistically composed, clearly shot by a professional with a telephoto lens. Someone had been watching them, waiting for exactly this moment of vulnerability. "Who benefits from exposing us?" she asked when Minho ended his latest call. "Multiple parties. Business rivals who want to destabilize my public image. Government officials who suspect my legitimate businesses are fronts. Criminal organizations who view my protection of you as weakness." Minho's scarred hand flexed with barely contained violence. "The question is who had the resources and access to orchestrate this level of surveillance." Victoria's phone rang, her father calling from New York. She'd been dreading this conversation since the story broke 3 hours ago. Victoria Elizabeth Hamilton. James Hamilton's voice carried across the Pacific like rolling thunder. "What in God's name is happening in Seoul?" "Dad, I can explain. The Wall Street Journal just called asking about your romantic entanglement with a Korean businessman under federal investigation for money laundering. The hotel board is in emergency session because our stock price dropped 12 points in 2 hours. So please, by all means, explain." Victoria felt her carefully constructed professional reputation crumbling in real time. "I'm investigating financial crimes that could impact our Asian expansion. By sleeping with the primary suspect? I'm not sleeping with..." Victoria caught Minho watching her with dark amusement. "It's more complicated than the photographs suggest. It's always more complicated with you, sweetheart. But this time, your complications have international consequences." James Hamilton's sigh carried decades of paternal concern. "I'm sending a security team and a legal advisor. You're coming home immediately." "I can't leave yet." "Victoria, there are people who want to kill me, Dad. Minho is the only thing keeping me alive right now." Silence stretched across the connection as James Hamilton processed this information. "Kill you? What kind of investigation have you stumbled into?" Victoria looked at Minho, who nodded grimly. If her father was sending security teams anyway, partial truth might be safer than complete deception. The kind where organized crime and legitimate business intersect in ways that threaten billions of dollars in illegal profits. "I've discovered evidence of systematic money laundering, but documenting it has made me a target." "Then come home and turn your evidence over to federal authorities." "It's not that simple. The corruption involves Korean government officials, American business interests, and criminal organizations on both sides of the Pacific. If I run now, people will die to cover up what I've uncovered." Another long pause. "People including Kang Minho?" Victoria met Minho's eyes across the small apartment. "People including the man I think I'm falling in love with." The admission hung in the air like smoke. Minho's expression shifted through surprise, vulnerability, and something that might have been hope before settling on resigned acceptance. "I'll call you back," James Hamilton said, and disconnected. Victoria set down her phone to find Minho studying her with unreadable intensity. "You think you're falling in love with me?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I know I am. The question is whether you're brave enough to let yourself love me back." Minho stood and walked to the apartment's small window, staring out at Seoul's endless lights. "Love is a luxury I can't afford." It makes you vulnerable, gives enemies weapons they can use against you. It also gives you something worth fighting for besides survival. You don't understand what you're asking. Minho's voice carried the weight of years of careful control. I've built my life around emotional distance because caring gets people killed. My father loved his family too much to see betrayal coming. That love destroyed him. Victoria joined him at the window, close enough to feel his tension radiating like heat. Your father's love didn't destroy him. Someone else's greed and violence did. There's a difference. Is there? Every person I've allowed myself to care about has become a target. My mother lives behind bodyguards because her son is a criminal. Park Jun-sik nearly died tonight because he tried to protect you. How many casualties am I supposed to accept for the privilege of feeling human? Victoria turned to face him fully. What if, instead of seeing love as weakness, you saw it as strength? What if caring about people motivated you to be better, instead of more careful? Better? Minho laughed bitterly. Victoria, 3 hours ago I ordered the execution of a man who threatened your safety. While you were reading gossip articles, I was authorizing torture to extract information about who's targeting you. The blood on my hands isn't metaphorical. The revelation should have horrified her. Instead, Victoria felt a strange calm settle over her spirit. Did it work? The torture? Minho looked startled by her matter-of-fact question. Yes, we know who's orchestrating the surveillance and media attacks. Then you did what you had to do to protect someone you care about. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you a man, fighting with the only tools you know how to use. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you, Victoria admitted. But I'm also terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to love you. Minho's resistance cracked like ice under spring sun. He pulled Victoria against him with desperate urgency, burying his face in her hair as if she were his only anchor to humanity. If we do this, he whispered, if I let myself love you, there's no going back. My enemies will try to destroy you, my allies will see you as weakness, and my mother will hate you for representing everything she fears about my true nature. And if we don't do this, we'll both spend the rest of our lives wondering what we threw away out of fear. Minho pulled back to look at her face, searching for any hint of doubt or deception. Finding none, he kissed her with a tenderness that spoke of promises and prayers. When they parted, Victoria saw a different man in his eyes. Not the careful criminal or the polished CEO, but someone raw and real and utterly committed to whatever came next. I love you, he said, the words sounding like a confession and a battle cry simultaneously. God help us both, but I love you, Victoria Hamilton. I love you too, Minho. All of you, the good and the bad and everything in between. As they held each other in the small safe house apartment, Soul's lights painting patterns on their skin, neither could know that across the city, forces were already mobilizing to test whether their love was strong enough to survive the war it had just declared. Victoria woke to the sound of Minho's voice speaking rapid Korean on the phone, his tone carrying the cold authority she was learning to recognize as his operational persona. Pale morning light filtered through the safe house's reinforced windows, and the smell of strong coffee suggested he'd been awake for hours coordinating responses to their crisis. What's the situation? She asked when he ended the call. Minho turned to face her, and Victoria's heart clenched at the exhaustion etched in his features. Choi So Young. She's the one behind the surveillance and media manipulation. So Young? Your ex-fiancé? Former fiancé. Current nightmare. Minho's jaw tightened with barely contained fury. She's been feeding information to both Korean prosecutors and what she believes are American federal investigators. Her goal was to force you out of Seoul and destroy my relationship with you by any means necessary. Victoria felt pieces clicking into place. The photographers at the restaurant, the coordinated media blitz. She orchestrated everything, including putting you in danger. So Young contacted some very dangerous people and told them an American investigator was threatening to expose their operations. She didn't care if they killed you to solve the problem. The casual mention of her potential murder sent ice through Victoria's veins, but she forced herself to focus on strategy rather than panic. What does she want? Minho's phone buzzed with an incoming text. His face darkened as he read the message. She wants to meet. Neutral location, just her and you. She says she has a proposal that will resolve everything cleanly. It's obviously a trap. Obviously. But So Young isn't stupid enough to try anything violent in public. She's gambling that she can manipulate or intimidate you into leaving voluntarily. Minho met Victoria's eyes with grim determination. I'm not letting you go alone. Actually, you are. Victoria, if she wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. This is about control and humiliation, not murder. Let me talk to her woman to woman. Sometimes direct confrontation is more effective than elaborate schemes. 3 hours later, Victoria sat across from Choi So Young in the private dining room of an upscale restaurant in Cheongdam-dong. So Young looked flawless in cream-colored Chanel, her makeup applied with surgical precision, and her smile sharp enough to draw blood. You're more beautiful than the photographs suggested. So Young began in perfect English, her tone conversational despite the obvious threat in her posture. I can see why Minho was temporarily distracted. Temporarily? Men like Minho don't change their fundamental nature for foreign curiosities. You represent rebellion against expectations, but rebellion always burns itself out eventually. So Young sipped her tea delicately. The question is how much damage you're willing to cause in the meantime. Victoria studied her opponent across the pristine white tablecloth. So Young carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted through calculated manipulation. What do you want, So Young? I want you gone. Out of Seoul, out of Korea, out of Minho's life, permanently. And in return? In return, the media campaign against you stops. The photographs disappear from social media. Your hotel company's stock price recovers. Your father's business reputation remains intact. So Young leaned forward with predatory grace. More importantly, the criminal organizations I've inadvertently provoked lose interest in eliminating you. Victoria felt her pulse accelerate. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a solution to problems I created while protecting someone I love. So Young's mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine pain beneath the polished surface. Minho and I were engaged for 3 years. We built our lives around each other, planned futures that integrated our families and business interests. Then you appeared and reduced everything to ruins in 3 weeks. I didn't seduce him away from you. Your engagement was already over. Was it? Or did Minho simply convince himself it was over because he was bored, and you represented something exotic and dangerous? So Young's laugh carried bitter edges. You don't understand Korean culture, Victoria. Relationships here aren't just about individual feelings. They're about family honor, social obligations, and generational planning. What you call love, we call temporary insanity. Despite herself, Victoria felt So Young's words hitting vulnerable targets. She was foreign, temporary, potentially destructive to everything Minho had built. Even if that's true, it should be his choice to make. His choices affect everyone around him. His mother, his employees, his business partners, his community. Your American individualism is a luxury that wealthy Korean men can't afford. So Young placed a manila envelope on the table between them. 48 hours, Victoria. Leave Seoul voluntarily, or I'll destroy both of you in ways that make this week's gossip look like friendly publicity. Victoria opened the envelope to find photographs that made her blood freeze. Images of her father leaving his New York office, her assistant Sarah shopping in Seoul, her best friend Emma walking her dog in Central Park. You're threatening my family? I'm demonstrating the scope of resources available to me. Your investigation has attracted attention from people who view collateral damage as acceptable cost of doing business. So Young's voice carried deadly certainty. Leave, and everyone you love remains safe. Stay, and learn what happens when Americans interfere in matters beyond their understanding. Victoria stared at the photographs, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. So Young had played this perfectly, using Victoria's love for other people as leverage against her determination to save Minho. What about Minho? What happens to him if I leave? Minho survives because he's valuable. His organization continues operating. His mother remains protected. And eventually he marries someone appropriate who understands her place in his world. So Young smiled with vicious satisfaction. Everyone wins except your romantic delusions. Victoria closed the envelope, her decision crystallizing with painful clarity. She couldn't risk her family's safety for a relationship that might be exactly the temporary rebellion So Young described. 48 hours, she said quietly. 48 hours, So Young confirmed. And Victoria? Don't make the mistake of thinking Minho will choose you over everything else he's built. Korean men understand sacrifice in ways that American women rarely comprehend. As Victoria walked out of the restaurant into Seoul's humid afternoon, she realized she'd just agreed to break her own heart to save everyone she loved, including the man she'd have to convince to let her go. But what she couldn't know was that Minho had been monitoring the meeting through carefully placed surveillance, and that he'd just heard every word of So Young's ultimatum, including the threats against Victoria's family that would require him to make the most dangerous choice of his carefully controlled life. Victoria returned to the safe house to find Minho staring at his laptop screen with the focused intensity of a man planning war. Documents covered every surface. Photographs, financial records, personnel files, and what appeared to be surveillance reports dating back months. How much did you hear? She asked, setting down her purse with carefully controlled calm. All of it. Minho didn't look up from his screen. So Young's been preparing this operation since the night you challenged me at the Gala. She's documented your investigation, mapped your family's routines, and cultivated relationships with some genuinely dangerous people. Victoria sank into the chair across from him, exhaustion settling into her bones like lead. Then you know I have to leave. Do I? The question hung between them, loaded with implications Victoria wasn't ready to examine. She'd spent the entire ride back from her meeting with So Young mentally preparing for the conversation about sacrifice and noble self-denial, but Minho's tone suggested he had different plans. She has photographs of my family, Minho. My father, my friends, people who have nothing to do with any of this. I can't risk their lives for a relationship that started 3 weeks ago. What if I told you there was another option? Victoria looked up to find Minho watching her, with the calculating expression she was learning, meant he'd identified a solution that would require considerable risk. I'm listening. Minho turned his laptop around to show her a document that made her pulse accelerate. It was a contract written in Korean and English, stamped with official seals and signed by multiple parties. This is a cooperation agreement between So Young's family business and an organization called the Red Phoenix Syndicate, dated 6 months ago, well before your arrival in Seoul. Victoria leaned forward to study the details. What kind of cooperation? Money laundering through her family's art import business. The Red Phoenix has been looking for legitimate fronts to clean profits from human trafficking and drug distribution. So Young provided access to international auction houses and private collectors who don't ask questions about provenance. How did you get this? So Young made the mistake of threatening someone I care about. That activated resources she doesn't know I possess. Minho's smile held no warmth. She positioned herself as concerned about your investigation, but she's actually terrified you'll discover evidence of her own criminal activities. Victoria felt the chess game shifting beneath her feet. She's not protecting you from me. She's protecting herself. Exactly. And her partnership with the Red Phoenix makes her far more vulnerable than she realizes. Minho closed the laptop and looked at Victoria directly. I can destroy her in 24 hours, expose her criminal activities, have her arrested by Korean authorities, and neutralize her threats against your family. What's the cost? Direct war with the Red Phoenix Syndicate. They'll view my actions against their partner as a declaration of hostilities. My organization isn't afraid of that conflict, but it will be bloody and public in ways that could destroy my mother's life. Victoria understood the impossible choice Minho was offering her. Save their relationship by sacrificing his mother's safety, or accept So Young's ultimatum and spare everyone except their own hearts. There has to be another way. There is. Minho stood and walked to a secure safe hidden behind a bookshelf. From it, he withdrew a thick manila folder sealed with red wax. But it requires trusting me with something that could destroy both of us. Victoria accepted the folder with trembling hands. The wax seal bore an insignia she didn't recognize, a stylized phoenix surrounded by Korean characters. What is this? Documentation of every criminal transaction my organization has conducted for the past 5 years. Financial records, operational plans, personnel files, evidence of bribes, murders, and money laundering that would send half of Seoul's elite to prison for life. Minho's voice carried the weight of absolute confession, including complete evidence of my own crimes. Victoria stared at the sealed folder as if it were a bomb. Why are you giving this to me? Because it's the only leverage strong enough to protect you from So Young and the Red Phoenix, while giving us time to find a permanent solution. Minho returned to his chair, his hands clasped with forced calm. Take that evidence to the American embassy. Tell them you've uncovered a criminal conspiracy that spans both countries. Request protection for your family and yourself while you cooperate with international authorities. And you? What happens to you when I turn over evidence of your crimes? I get arrested, tried, and probably spend the rest of my life in prison. But you stay alive. Your family remains safe. And So Young loses all leverage because the story becomes about international justice rather than personal scandal. Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes. You're asking me to destroy you to save myself. I'm asking you to choose your family's lives over my freedom. It's not a difficult moral calculation. It is if I love you. Minho reached across the table to touch her hand gently. Then love me enough to let me do something honorable for once. Let me protect you the way I should have protected my father. Victoria stared at the sealed folder containing Minho's life and freedom, wrapped in red wax and impossible choices. Outside the safe house windows, Seoul pulsed with its usual energy, oblivious to the decision that would reshape multiple lives. There has to be another way, she whispered. Maybe there is, Minho said quietly. But we have 36 hours to find it before So Young's deadline expires and people start dying. As if summoned by their conversation, Minho's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His face went pale as he read it. What now? Victoria asked. Park Junick. He's been taken. Red Phoenix operatives grabbed him 2 hours ago. Minho stood with deadly purpose, his casual clothes suddenly seeming like battle gear. They're going to torture him for information about our operations and then kill him publicly as a warning. Victoria felt the walls closing in around them. How long do we have? If Park talks immediately, maybe 6 hours before they come for us. If he tries to protect us. Minho's voice trailed off as he contemplated his mentor's capacity for sacrifice. Then we'd better find that third option fast, Victoria said, standing to face whatever came next. Because I refuse to let anyone else die for our love story. But even as she spoke with determined confidence, Victoria knew that with Park's capture, their impossible situation had just become potentially fatal for everyone she cared about. The abandoned warehouse in Incheon reeked of rust and fear. Victoria crouched behind a shipping container, her heart hammering against her ribs as Minho coordinated with his team through an earpiece. They'd located Park Jun-sik within 4 hours of his abduction, but rescuing him would require the kind of violence Victoria had only seen in movies. You shouldn't be here, Minho whispered for the third time, checking his gun with practiced efficiency. This isn't a negotiation or a business meeting. People are going to die tonight. Park was taken because of me. I'm not hiding in the safe house while you risk your life to fix my mistakes. Your mistake was falling in love with me. Everything else is just consequence. Through the warehouse's broken windows, Victoria could see Red Phoenix guards patrolling the perimeter with automatic weapons. Somewhere inside the building, Park was being tortured for information that could destroy Minho's entire organization. 2 minutes, came the voice through Minho's earpiece. All teams in position. Minho looked at Victoria one final time, his eyes reflecting 1,000 unspoken fears. If something goes wrong, if I don't make it out, you're making it out. We both are. Along with Park. Victoria grabbed his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her determined gaze. No noble sacrifice speeches. We're all going home tonight. The first gunshot shattered the warehouse's silence like breaking glass. Minho moved with lethal grace, Victoria following close behind as they navigated through corridors filled with the sounds of battle. His team had clearly done this before. Each movement coordinated, each advance calculated to minimize risk while maximizing tactical advantage. They found Park in a makeshift interrogation room, zip-tied to a metal chair and bloodied but alive. 2 Red Phoenix operatives lay dead nearby, evidence of Minho's team's swift efficiency. Took you long enough, Park managed through swollen lips, though his eyes showed relief at seeing them both alive. Can you walk? Minho asked, cutting through the restraints with a tactical knife. I can run if necessary, but we have a problem. They know about the Hamilton family's security arrangements. They're planning to grab Victoria's father when he lands in Seoul tomorrow. Victoria felt ice form in her veins. Dad's coming to Seoul. Emergency flight. He should be landing at Incheon around noon. Park struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on Minho for support. So-young gave them his flight information, hotel reservations, security details. It's a trap designed to force your compliance. Then we stop them, Victoria said with deadly calm. We? Minho looked at her with something between admiration and terror. Victoria, these people kill families to send messages. Your father isn't trained for this kind of threat. Then we make sure he never faces it. The warehouse erupted in fresh gunfire as more Red Phoenix operatives arrived, turning their rescue mission into a running battle through industrial corridors. Victoria stayed close to Minho as they fought their way toward the exit, her photographer's eye cataloging details that her survival instincts processed into tactical information. They reached Minho's cars to find 2 vehicles destroyed and only 1 sedan remaining intact. As they climbed in, Minho driving, Victoria in passenger seat, Park bleeding in the back. Police sirens began wailing in the distance. Hospital first, Minho decided, checking Park's injuries in the rearview mirror. Then we deal with your father's situation. No hospital, Park said firmly. Medical facilities are too easy to monitor. Take me to the safe house. I've survived worse than this. As they raced through Seoul's pre-dawn streets, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from So Young. Your father's plane lands in 18 hours. Still planning to stay in Seoul? Victoria showed the message to Minho, whose jaw clenched with barely controlled fury. She's not bluffing, he said. The Red Phoenix will grab your father the moment he steps off that plane unless we give them a reason not to. What kind of reason? The kind that requires me to do something that will probably get us all killed. Minho took a sharp turn into an underground parking garage beneath an apartment complex Victoria didn't recognize. But first, we need to get Park medical attention and contact your father before he boards that flight. In the garage's fluorescent lighting, Victoria could see the extent of Park's injuries, bruising that suggested systematic beatings, cuts that looked suspiciously like interrogation techniques, exhaustion that spoke of hours of psychological pressure. What did you tell them? Minho asked as they helped Park toward an elevator. Nothing useful, but they didn't ask the questions I expected. Park's voice carried confused concern. They weren't interested in our operations or financial records. They kept asking about you, Victoria. Your family history, your business connections, your reasons for targeting Minho specifically. Why would they care about my motivations? Because, Minho said, as understanding dawned in his expression, this was never about protecting their money laundering operations. Someone specifically wanted you in Seoul, investigating me, falling in love with me, becoming a target that could be used to manipulate my decisions. Victoria felt the conspiracy expanding around her like quicksand. You think I was manipulated into coming here? I think someone very smart recognized that an American heiress investigating Korean criminal organizations would either expose me or fall in love with me. Either outcome would serve their purposes. The elevator opened onto a private floor, where medical equipment and supplies waited, as if prepared for exactly this scenario. As Minho's people began treating Park's injuries, Victoria tried to call her father. The call went straight to voicemail. When she tried the Hamilton Group's main number, she was told that James Hamilton was unreachable and had left instructions not to be disturbed during his flight to Seoul. He's already in the air, Victoria realized with growing dread. He's flying straight into their trap, and there's no way to warn him. Minho looked up from where he was helping bandage Park's wounds. Then we meet him at the airport with enough firepower to make the Red Phoenix reconsider their kidnapping plans. You're talking about a war in one of Asia's busiest airports. I'm talking about protecting the woman I love by any means necessary. Minho's eyes held the cold determination Victoria was learning meant someone was about to die. But there might be another way. One that doesn't involve innocent civilians getting caught in crossfire. The secure medical facility beneath Seoul resembled a war room more than a clinic. Minho's team had transformed the apartment into a command center, with laptops displaying airport schematics, flight tracking information, and real-time surveillance feeds from Incheon International. Victoria watched the controlled chaos with growing dread. In 6 hours, her father's plane would land, and James Hamilton would walk into a trap designed to force her complete surrender to people who viewed murder as routine business practice. There, Park said from his medical bed, pointing at a surveillance monitor. Red Phoenix operatives have been positioning themselves throughout the airport for the past 12 hours. They're not planning a subtle kidnapping. This is a military operation. Victoria studied the screen, counting at least 15 men in positions that would give them complete control over her father's path from plane to transportation. How many people does Minho have? Enough to fight them, Minho answered grimly, but not enough to guarantee your father's safety in the middle of a firefight. Airport security, innocent travelers, international implications, too many variables that could go catastrophically wrong. Then what do you suggest? Minho turned from a tactical map to face her directly. I surrender myself to the Red Phoenix. Give them what they really want in exchange for your father's safety and your family's protection. Absolutely not. Victoria, listen. No, you listen. Victoria stood, her voice carrying the authority that had built hotel empires. I came to Seoul to investigate financial crimes. I stayed to fall in love with you. I'm not watching you sacrifice yourself to fix problems that aren't entirely your fault. Park cleared his throat from his medical bed. There might be a third option, but it requires trusting someone we have good reason not to trust. Both Victoria and Minho turned to stare at him. So young, Park explained. She created this situation by involving the Red Phoenix, but she's also the only person who can defuse it. The question is what she wants badly enough to betray her new criminal partners. Victoria felt a plan beginning to form. Dangerous, requiring perfect timing, but potentially their only chance at saving everyone. She wants Minho back. She wants me gone. What if we give her exactly what she thinks she wants? Explain, Minho said, though his expression suggested he already understood the direction of her thoughts. Public breakup. Humiliating, final, witnessed by enough people to make headlines across Seoul. You reject me completely, choose duty and tradition over foreign love, return to So Young as the reformed chaebol who learned his lesson about inappropriate relationships. And in reality? In reality, we disappear. New identities, new lives. Somewhere the Red Phoenix and So Young can't follow. My father stays safe because I'm no longer a threat to anyone. You escape the life that was destroying you piece by piece, and So Young gets the public vindication she craves. Minho stared at her with something between admiration and horror. You're talking about abandoning everything. Your family, your business, your entire life. I'm talking about choosing love over everything else. The question is whether you're brave enough to do the same. Park shifted painfully on his medical bed. It could work. I have contacts who specialize in making people disappear completely. New documents, financial arrangements, safe passage to countries with no extradition treaties. But once you're gone forever. No contact with family, no return to your old lives, no second chances. Victoria looked at Minho, seeing her own desperate hope reflected in his dark eyes. What do you think? I think, Minho said slowly, that you're asking me to choose between protecting everyone I've ever cared about and running away with the woman I love. I'm asking you to choose between a life of constant violence and a chance at something real. Your mother will be safer if you disappear. No more criminal son to worry about. Your organization will survive without you. Park can manage the transition. The only question is whether love is enough to build a new life on. Minho's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His face went pale as he read it. What now? Victoria asked, though she dreaded the answer. Your father's flight just changed course. Instead of landing at Incheon, it's being diverted to a private airfield controlled by the Red Phoenix. So Young isn't waiting for our decision. She's forcing it. Victoria felt their carefully constructed plans crumbling like sand. How long do we have? 2 hours, maybe less. The private airfield is 40 minutes from Seoul, completely isolated. Perfect for the kind of operation that leaves no witnesses. Park struggled to sit up despite his injuries. There's no negotiating now. They have complete control of the situation, which means they're planning to eliminate everyone involved. James Hamilton, Victoria, probably Minho as well. So, Young has decided that if she can't have him, no one can. Victoria stared at the tactical displays surrounding them, each screen showing a different aspect of their impossible situation. Her father was flying toward certain death. The woman she'd tried to trust had betrayed them completely, and the man she loved was preparing to sacrifice himself in a battle he couldn't win. "No," she said with sudden determination. "This ends now. Not with more violence, not with more sacrifice, but with the truth." "What truth?" Minho asked. Victoria walked to the secure communication system Park's team had established. The truth about everything. So Young's criminal partnerships, the Red Phoenix's operations, your organization's activities, my investigation, all of it. Live broadcast, multiple media outlets, complete transparency. Victoria, if you expose everything, if I expose everything, it becomes a public scandal instead of a private war. So Young loses her leverage because everyone knows what she's done. The Red Phoenix loses their operational secrecy. Your organization faces justice through legal channels instead of violent ones. And my father becomes a witness instead of a victim. Minho stared at her with something approaching awe. "You're talking about destroying all of us to save all of us. I'm talking about choosing truth over survival. It's what I came to Seoul to do in the first place." As Victoria began composing the media contacts that would reshape multiple lives within the hour, she realized that sometimes the only way to win an impossible game was to change the rules completely, even if it meant sacrificing everything she'd fought to protect. The live broadcast began at exactly 11 a.m. from a makeshift studio in Minho's secure facility. Victoria sat alone at a simple desk, her camera-ready appearance betraying none of the terror coursing through her veins. Behind her, screens displayed financial documents, photographs, and evidence that would topple some of Seoul's most powerful figures. "My name is Victoria Hamilton, and I'm broadcasting from Seoul with information about an international criminal conspiracy involving money laundering, human trafficking, and systematic corruption spanning both Korean and American business interests." Across the city, emergency alerts began flooding news outlets as Victoria's story spread through social media with viral intensity. In the Red Phoenix's private airfield, confusion erupted as operatives received conflicting orders about their high-profile American hostage. Minho watched the broadcast from a separate monitor while coordinating a desperate rescue mission for Victoria's father. With their cover blown and their secrets exposed, speed had become their only ally. "The evidence I'm presenting today will shock Korea's business community," Victoria continued with professional calm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "But more importantly, it will save lives by exposing criminal organizations that have operated in shadow for too long." Her phone buzzed with an urgent text from So Young. "Stop the broadcast now, or your father dies in the next 60 seconds. Victoria looked directly into the camera. "I'm being threatened as I speak by individuals who want to silence this information. But truth doesn't negotiate with terror, and justice doesn't bow to intimidation." At the Red Phoenix airfield, James Hamilton's plane touched down to find a very different reception than expected. Instead of a handful of operatives, the private facility crawled with Korean police, international media, and American embassy personnel who'd been alerted by Victoria's broadcast. So Young watched her carefully orchestrated plans dissolve in real time from her luxury apartment in Cheongdam-dong. The criminal partnerships she'd cultivated, the leverage she'd accumulated, the power she'd wielded, all of it crumbling as Victoria Hamilton spoke truth with devastating precision. The woman known as Choi So-young, daughter of respected art dealer Choi Dong-wook, has been operating as a liaison between legitimate Korean businesses and the criminal organization called Red Phoenix, Victoria announced, displaying financial records that would end So-young's freedom forever. Minho's tactical team reached the airfield to find the situation already resolved by Victoria's preemptive strike. James Hamilton, surrounded by protective agents, was very much alive and increasingly impressed by his daughter's strategic brilliance. Additionally, Victoria continued, I must reveal that Kang Minho, CEO of Apex Holdings and son of cosmetics magnate Kang Hye-jin, has been operating criminal enterprises under the cover of legitimate business activities. Minho watched his life's work collapse with something approaching relief. Every crime he'd committed, every moral compromise he'd accepted, every person he'd hurt, all of it finally exposed to daylight that would either destroy him or set him free. However, Victoria added, her voice carrying new weight, Mr. Kang has been cooperating with my investigation for the past week, providing evidence that will help authorities dismantle these criminal networks completely. The lie was beautiful in its audacity. With a single sentence, Victoria had transformed Minho from criminal mastermind to whistleblowing hero, creating legal protection that no amount of money or violence could overcome. So-young's apartment door exploded inward as Korean authorities arrived with arrest warrants based on evidence Victoria was broadcasting in real time. The woman who'd orchestrated kidnapping plots and murder schemes found herself face down on Italian marble, zip-tied, and reading her rights in languages she barely understood. The Korean authorities, working in cooperation with American federal agencies, are moving to arrest multiple individuals as I speak, Victoria announced. This investigation represents unprecedented international cooperation in dismantling organized crime networks that have operated across borders for years. Park Jun-sik, watching from his medical bed, smiled despite his injuries. Victoria had just rewritten the entire narrative, transforming their desperate situation into a victory for justice that would echo across both countries. I want to conclude by saying that truth is more powerful than violence, that love is stronger than fear, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is simply refuse to be silent. Victoria looked directly into the camera with the same fearless determination that had challenged Minho at the Gala 3 weeks earlier. No organization, no matter how powerful, can survive complete transparency. As the broadcast ended, Victoria realized she'd just declared war on some of the most dangerous people in Asia, and won by changing the battlefield entirely. But victory came with consequences neither she nor Minho had anticipated, and the price of their public redemption was about to test whether their love could survive the harsh light of international scrutiny. The Korean prosecutor's office resembled controlled chaos as international law enforcement agencies converged on Seoul's biggest criminal bust in decades. Victoria sat in a secure conference room, providing detailed testimony to officials from 3 countries, while Minho waited in a separate facility, his fate hanging on her ability to convince authorities that his cooperation had been genuine. Ms. Hamilton, the lead Korean prosecutor began in careful English, your broadcast has created unprecedented complications. While we appreciate the evidence you've provided, your methods have compromised several ongoing investigations. Victoria kept her expression neutral, despite the ice forming in her stomach. I had reason to believe that multiple lives were in immediate danger. Sometimes justice requires choosing transparency over procedure. And Mr. Kang's cooperation? When exactly did that begin? This was the crucial moment. Victoria's lie about Minho's willing assistance needed to become official truth, backed by evidence that would hold up under international scrutiny. He contacted me 4 days ago through intermediaries, expressing concern about the Red Phoenix organization's escalating violence. He provided financial records and operational details that made today's arrests possible. The prosecutor studied files spread across the conference table. These documents show extensive criminal activity spanning 5 years. You're asking us to believe Mr. Kang suddenly developed a conscience? I'm asking you to recognize that people can change when given the right motivation. Minho risked everything to expose the Red Phoenix because he realized that love and justice were more important than power and control. Through the conference room's window, Victoria could see protesters gathering outside the building, some demanding Minho's immediate imprisonment, others calling him a hero for exposing corruption. Seoul's media had transformed their story into a national drama that would define multiple careers. Her phone buzzed with a message from James Hamilton. "Proud of you, sweetheart. Coming to get you now." Relief flooded through Victoria's system. Her father was safe, the immediate threats had been neutralized, and the Red Phoenix organization was crumbling under international pressure. But Minho remained in custody while lawyers and prosecutors debated his fate. "There's another issue," the prosecutor continued. "Choi So-young claims that your entire investigation was orchestrated by American intelligence agencies, seeking to destabilize Korean business interests. She's portraying herself as a patriot who tried to protect Korean sovereignty from foreign manipulation." Victoria felt anger flash through her chest. Even in defeat, So-young was attempting to transform her criminal activities into nationalist heroism. "Ms. Choi's claims can be easily verified," Victoria replied calmly. "My investigation was privately funded and independently conducted. I have financial records, communication logs, and witnesses who can confirm that no government agencies were involved in my work. What about your relationship with Mr. Kang? So-young alleges that you seduced him specifically to gain access to criminal information." The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that could destroy both Victoria's credibility and Minho's chances for leniency. "My relationship with Minho developed naturally during my investigation. I won't apologize for falling in love with a man who chose redemption over easy profit." Victoria met the prosecutor's gaze directly. "The question isn't whether our relationship influenced our decisions. It's whether those decisions ultimately served justice." A knock interrupted the interrogation as James Hamilton entered the conference room, flanked by legal advisors and American embassy personnel. His presence immediately shifted the room's power dynamics. "Gentlemen," James Hamilton's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to international negotiations. "I believe we can resolve these complications efficiently. My daughter has provided evidence that will convict dozens of criminals and recover billions in stolen assets. Mr. Kang's cooperation has been invaluable in dismantling networks that have operated with impunity for years. Perhaps we should focus on results rather than methodology." The Korean prosecutor exchanged glances with his colleagues before responding. "Mr. Hamilton, your daughter's actions have created legal precedents that will be debated for years. We appreciate the evidence, but we cannot ignore the irregular nature of this investigation." "Then let me suggest a solution that serves everyone's interests," James Hamilton said, opening a leather briefcase filled with official documents. "Victoria returns to the United States to continue her cooperation with federal authorities. Mr. Kang accepts a plea agreement that acknowledges his crimes while recognizing his assistance in exposing greater corruption. The Red Phoenix organization faces complete dismantlement, and Korean-American law enforcement cooperation receives positive international attention." Victoria realized her father had been negotiating Minho's fate while she provided testimony. The documents in his briefcase represented hours of careful diplomacy designed to save the man she loved. "And if Mr. Kang violates the terms of such an agreement?" the prosecutor asked. "Then he faces immediate extradition to the United States. where his crimes carry life sentences without possibility of parole, James Hamilton replied. But I suspect a man who risked everything for love and justice won't return to his previous life. Through the conference room's window, Victoria saw Minho being escorted from the prosecution building by American agents. Even at a distance, she could see the mixture of relief and uncertainty in his posture. "We have a deal," the prosecutor announced after conferring with his team. "But Ms. Hamilton and Mr. Kang will be prohibited from entering Korea for a minimum of 5 years while these cases proceed through international courts." Victoria nodded, accepting exile as the price of their freedom. Seoul had become their salvation and their prison, the city where they'd found love and lost innocence in equal measure. As official documents were signed and legal arrangements finalized, Victoria realized that their story was ending exactly where it had begun, with impossible choices between duty and desire, between safety and truth, between the lives they'd built and the future they dared to dream. The Hamilton family's private jet climbed through Seoul's smog-laden sky as Victoria watched Korea disappear beneath clouds and consequence. Across from her, Minho sat in careful silence, his usual composure shattered by the magnitude of change rushing toward them both. "So," James Hamilton said from his leather chair, studying the man his daughter had risked everything to save. "You're the criminal mastermind who stole my daughter's heart." "Dad," Victoria warned, but Minho raised a hand to stop her intervention. "Your daughter saved my life, Mr. Hamilton. Several times, in fact. I'm not sure gratitude is sufficient to repay that debt." "Gratitude isn't what I'm looking for," James Hamilton replied. "I want to understand what happens next. Victoria has effectively ended her career in international business to protect you. The Hamilton Group's Asian expansion is dead in the water thanks to this scandal. My daughter's reputation will follow her for decades. So I'm curious about your plans." Victoria watched Minho absorb the full cost of their choices. Until now, their focus had been survival and escape. The mundane reality of building new lives from the ashes of their old ones hadn't fully registered. "I have resources," Minho said carefully. "Accounts that weren't connected to criminal activities. Investments that can't be traced to illegal operations. We won't be wealthy by our previous standards, but we can live comfortably." "Where?" "New Zealand, initially. Clean air, beautiful landscapes, extradition treaties that should discourage pursuit by former associates." Minho looked at Victoria with uncertainty. "If that's acceptable." Victoria felt the weight of permanent exile settling over her spirit. New Zealand meant no more hotel empire, no more family businesses, no more Christmas mornings in the Connecticut mansion where she'd grown up. It meant choosing love over literally everything else she'd ever known. "It's acceptable," she said, reaching for Minho's scarred hand. "More than acceptable." James Hamilton observed their clasped hands with the expression of a man calculating complex equations. "There's something you both need to know, something that will change your understanding of everything that's happened." Victoria felt her pulse accelerate. "What are you talking about?" "Your investigation in Seoul wasn't as independent as you believed. The Hamilton Group has been working with American intelligence agencies for years, providing information about international business activities that might affect national security." James Hamilton's confession hung in the aircraft's recycled air like smoke. "Your trip to Seoul was suggested by people who wanted eyes on Korean criminal organizations, but who couldn't operate officially without diplomatic complications." The revelation hit Victoria like physical violence. "You used me. You sent me to investigate Minho knowing I might fall in love with him. We sent you to investigate financial crimes. Your emotional involvement was unexpected, but ultimately useful. Your genuine feelings made your infiltration more convincing than any trained operative could have achieved. Minho's hand tightened in Victoria's as understanding dawned in his dark eyes. The Hamilton Group is an intelligence front. The Hamilton Group is a legitimate business that occasionally cooperates with government agencies when national interests align with corporate interests, James Hamilton corrected. Victoria's feelings for you are real, but her presence in Seoul was orchestrated by people who needed your criminal organization exposed. Victoria stared at her father with growing horror. How long have you known? About me and Minho? About the danger I was in? About everything? Long enough to arrange backup plans that kept you both alive. The Korean authorities were prepared for your broadcast because we'd been coordinating with them for weeks. The Red Phoenix organization was already under surveillance when you began investigating them. Your relationship with Minho simply provided the perfect catalyst for bringing everything into the open. You manipulated us both. I protected you both. There's a difference, though I understand why you might not appreciate the distinction right now. James Hamilton leaned forward with paternal intensity. Victoria, you fell in love with a man who's killed people with his own hands. Minho, you fell in love with a woman whose investigation could have destroyed you completely. Neither of those facts changed because of government involvement. Victoria felt their entire love story recontextualizing itself in real time. Every moment of danger, every narrow escape, every impossible coincidence, all of it potentially orchestrated by agencies that viewed their emotions as useful tools. So what happens now? Minho asked, his voice carrying deadly calm. Do we disappear to New Zealand as planned? Or do your government handlers have other uses for reformed criminals and compromised heiresses? Now you get to choose, James Hamilton replied. You can disappear completely, live quiet lives under new identities, and pretend the past 5 years never happened. Or you can work with us officially, using your combined knowledge of international crime and business to help prevent other tragedies. Work with you how? Victoria asked. Consulting for agencies that need expertise in areas where you've both developed considerable knowledge. Minho understands criminal organizations in ways that no textbook could teach. You understand how legitimate businesses can be used for illegitimate purposes. Together, you could help save lives by preventing the kind of corruption you've both lived through. Victoria looked at Minho, seeing her own conflict reflected in his expression. They could disappear into anonymity, or they could transform their painful experiences into something that might help others avoid similar tragedies. And if we choose to disappear? Minho asked. Then you disappear with our blessing and our protection. New identities, clean histories, financial security, and the promise that no one will ever find you unless you want to be found. The aircraft's engines hummed through a silence heavy with possibility and consequence. Outside the windows, the Pacific Ocean stretched toward futures neither Victoria nor Minho had imagined possible. We'll need time to decide, Victoria said finally. Of course. But remember, some choices can't be unmade, and some opportunities don't come twice. James Hamilton returned to his files with the satisfaction of someone who'd planted seeds that would grow in their own time. As Victoria and Minho sat together in the leather seats that carried them toward uncertain tomorrows, both realized that their love story was ending where it had begun, with impossible choices between competing loyalties, between the people they'd been and the people they might become. 3 months later, Victoria stood on a cliff overlooking Milford Sound as New Zealand's winter sun painted the fjord in shades of gold and emerald. The cottage behind her, modest by her previous standards, palatial by most measures, had become the sanctuary where she and Minho were learning who they might be without the weight of their former lives. Minho emerged from the cottage carrying 2 cups of coffee, his movements carrying the relaxed grace of someone no longer expecting assassination attempts. 3 months of safety had begun erasing the hypervigilance that had defined his adult life. "Any regrets?" he asked, settling beside her on the wooden bench they'd built together during their first week in exile. Victoria accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the ceramic warmth. "About which part? Falling in love with a criminal, exposing international conspiracies on live television, or abandoning my family's business to live in one of the most beautiful places on earth? Any of it. All of it." Victoria considered the question seriously. The woman who'd challenged Minho at a Seoul Gala seemed like someone from another lifetime. Ambitious, driven, defined by achievements and acquisitions that now felt hollow compared to the simple pleasure of morning coffee with the man she loved. "I miss my family," she admitted. "I miss knowing that my work mattered to people beyond myself. I miss the rush of closing impossible deals and building something lasting. But I don't miss the loneliness. I don't miss the constant pressure to prove myself worthy of a legacy I never chose. And I definitely don't miss wondering if the man I loved was capable of changing for something better." Minho smiled, the expression transforming his features in ways that still took Victoria's breath away. 3 months of peace had revealed the man he might have been if his father had lived, if violence hadn't become his primary language, if love had found him before corruption claimed his soul. "I got another message from Park yesterday," Minho said, his tone carefully neutral. "The transition is complete. My former organization now operates exclusively in legitimate businesses, construction, real estate development, private security. No more money laundering, no more violence, no more crimes that require blood on anyone's hands. How do you feel about that?" "Relieved, mostly. I spent 15 years building something I hated because I thought I had no other choice. Discovering that other choices were always available has been educational." Victoria laughed, the sound carrying across the fjord like birdsong. "Educational. Only you would describe moral redemption as educational. I'm still learning how to be someone worth loving instead of someone worth fearing. It's harder than I expected, but more rewarding than I dared to hope." They sat in comfortable silence, watching clouds paint shadows across mountains that had stood unchanged since before human ambition learned to corrupt human hearts. Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from her father, the weekly check-in they'd established to maintain family connection despite geographical separation. "Any progress on your decision? The offer remains open, and there are cases that could use your expertise. No pressure, just possibilities. Love you both. Dad." Victoria showed the message to Minho, who read it with the careful attention he'd once reserved for criminal intelligence reports. "He's persistent," Minho observed. "It's a family trait. We don't give up easily on people we love or causes we believe in. What do you think? About working with them officially?" Victoria had been wrestling with the question for weeks. The opportunity to use their hard-earned knowledge to prevent others from experiencing similar corruption appealed to her sense of justice. But accepting would mean re-entering a world they'd fought so hard to escape. "I think," Victoria said slowly, "that we've learned something valuable about the difference between hiding from our past and transforming it into something useful. Meaning? Meaning maybe it's time to stop running and start building. Not the empire I inherited or the criminal organization you inherited, but something we create together. Something that helps instead of harms." Minho set down his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. "You want to go back. I want to move forward. With you. Toward something that honors what we've learned without repeating what we've survived. It would mean giving up this." Minho gestured toward the pristine landscape surrounding their cottage. "This peace this anonymity, this freedom from consequence. Freedom from consequence isn't the same as freedom from purpose. We could spend the rest of our lives hiding from who we used to be, or we could spend it becoming who we were meant to be. Minho stood and walked to the cliff's edge, his silhouette framed against New Zealand's endless sky. Victoria watched him process the decision that would reshape their carefully constructed sanctuary. "If we do this," he said finally, "if we go back to that world in any capacity, we go back together. No secrets, no separate agendas, no protecting each other through deception. Together," Victoria agreed, joining him at the cliff's edge. "Partners in every sense of the word." "Partners," Minho repeated, testing the word like wine. "I like the sound of that better than criminal and investigator." Victoria pulled out her phone and began composing a response to her father's message. As she typed, she realized they weren't abandoning their New Zealand sanctuary. They were carrying its peace with them into whatever came next. "We're ready to talk. Set up a meeting for next month. We have conditions, but we're interested in transforming experience into expertise. Time to turn our story into something that helps write better endings for other people. V&M." As the message sent, Victoria felt the same thrill she'd experienced when challenging Minho at the Seoul Gala. The electricity of stepping into unknown territory with courage as her only compass. But this time, she wasn't walking into danger alone. This time, she had a partner who understood that love meant choosing each other not just in moments of passion, but in moments of purpose. 6 months later, Victoria and Minho sat in a Washington, D.C. conference room that could have been transplanted from any international law firm. The view through floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Potomac River flowing past monuments to democracy and justice, while inside, representatives from 3 countries debated how to use their expertise without compromising ongoing operations. "Your first assignment," Director Sarah Chen of the FBI's International Organized Crime Division explained, "involves a money laundering network that spans from Bangkok to Vancouver. The operation uses legitimate art galleries and auction houses to clean profits from human trafficking." Victoria felt her pulse accelerate as familiar patterns emerged from the briefing materials. The same methodology So Young's family was using in Seoul. Exactly. "We believe the Red Phoenix organization's collapse created a power vacuum that other criminal enterprises are rushing to fill. Your knowledge of how these networks operate could help us prevent a new generation of victims." Minho studied surveillance photographs that showed young women being moved through what appeared to be legitimate cultural exchanges. His scarred hand clenched involuntarily as memories of similar operations surfaced from his criminal past. "Timeline?" he asked with professional calm. "Immediate. We have reason to believe they're planning to expand operations into the United States within the next 30 days. Once they establish domestic networks, shutting them down becomes exponentially more difficult." Victoria exchanged glances with Minho, seeing her own determination reflected in his dark eyes. This was why they'd chosen to emerge from their New Zealand sanctuary. Opportunities to transform their painful knowledge into protection for people who couldn't protect themselves. "What kind of cover identities?" Victoria asked. "Legitimate ones, mostly. You'll be consulting for an international art authentication firm that provides expertise to galleries and auction houses. Minho will be representing Korean investors interested in acquiring significant pieces for private collections." "And our relationship?" Director Chen smiled with what might have been approval. "Your relationship is perfect cover. Wealthy couple with international connections and expertise in exactly the areas these criminals are exploiting. You'll be hiding in plain sight." Over the following weeks, Victoria and Minho prepared for their first official mission, with the same careful attention they'd once devoted to survival. New identities that enhanced rather than erased their backgrounds. financial resources that would support their cover stories, and most importantly, communication protocols that would keep them connected to backup support. But on the night before their departure for Bangkok, Victoria woke to find Minho standing at their hotel window, staring out at Washington's illuminated monuments with an expression she couldn't read. "Second thoughts?" she asked, joining him at the window. "Third and fourth thoughts, actually. We're about to walk back into the world that nearly destroyed us both. Not as criminals or investigators this time, but as something potentially more dangerous. People who care about the outcome." Victoria understood his concern. Their New Zealand sanctuary had been safe precisely because it demanded nothing from them except the courage to love each other. This new life would require them to risk that love in service of strangers who might never know their names. "We could still disappear," she said quietly. "Go back to the cottage, grow vegetables, watch sunsets, pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist." "Could you? Really?" Minho turned from the window to face her directly. "Could you spend the next 50 years knowing that your knowledge might have prevented tragedies you chose not to prevent?" Victoria felt the truth settling in her chest, like a weight and a wings simultaneously. "No, I couldn't live with that kind of willful blindness. Neither could I, which means we're committed to a path that will probably break our hearts in new and creative ways. Probably, but maybe it will also heal parts of our hearts we didn't know were still wounded." Minho pulled Victoria into his arms with the desperate tenderness of someone preparing for battle. They'd survived criminal organizations, government manipulation, international scandals, and voluntary exile. Now they faced something potentially more challenging: the daily choice to use their love as fuel for justice rather than just comfort for each other. "Promise me something," Minho whispered against her hair. "Promise that if this work starts changing us in ways we don't like, we'll remember that we have a cottage in New Zealand where we can go back to just being Victoria and Minho instead of whatever the world needs us to be. I promise. But only if you promise that we'll give this everything we have before we retreat to our sanctuary. No holding back, no protecting each other from consequences we signed up for. Deal." As they held each other in the pre-dawn darkness, Victoria realized their love story had evolved beyond romance into something more complex and demanding. Partnership in the truest sense, where their individual healing had become inseparable from their shared commitment to healing a broken world. The next morning, they boarded a flight to Bangkok as Mr. and Mrs. Alexander Kim, art consultants with impeccable credentials and hidden expertise in exactly the kind of criminal operations they'd been hired to infiltrate. But as their plane climbed toward Asian skies, both Victoria and Minho understood that they were no longer running from their past or hiding from their future. They were finally, fully, choosing who they wanted to become, together. 2 years later, Victoria watched Minho testify before a congressional committee investigating international human trafficking networks. His calm, authoritative presentation of evidence that would convict dozens of criminals and free hundreds of victims represented a transformation so complete it still took her breath away. The man speaking to American lawmakers bore little resemblance to the dangerous CEO who had faced her across a Seoul ballroom. This version of Minho carried authority earned through service rather than fear, respect built on protection rather than intimidation, power derived from justice rather than violence. "Mr. Kim," the committee chair addressed him using their operational surname, "your expertise has been instrumental in disrupting criminal networks across 4 countries. Can you help us understand how these organizations recruit legitimate businesses as fronts for illegal activities?" Minho's response drew on knowledge he'd once used to build criminal empires, now repurposed to destroy them. Victoria felt pride swell in her chest as she watched the man she loved use his darkest experiences to create light for others. Their work over the past 2 years had taken them from Bangkok to Barcelona, from Vancouver to Vienna, always posing as art consultants while gathering intelligence that law enforcement agencies used to dismantle trafficking networks. The cover story had become increasingly real as both Victoria and Minho discovered genuine passion for the art world that provided their professional camouflage. Mrs. Kim, another committee member, addressed Victoria. Your investigative skills have helped identify financial patterns that traditional law enforcement missed. How do you recognize legitimate businesses that have been compromised by criminal infiltration? Victoria's answer reflected hard-won expertise in reading the subtle signs of corruption, the same skills that had first brought her to Seoul, now refined through successful operations that had saved lives across 3 continents. After the hearing, Victoria and Minho walked through Washington's spring afternoon toward the small apartment they maintained for their periodic returns to the United States. Their primary residence remained the New Zealand cottage, but their work required global mobility that had become second nature. "How does it feel?" Victoria asked, as they paused beside the Lincoln Memorial. "Testifying about criminal organizations instead of running them?" "Surreal, mostly. 2 years ago, I would have killed anyone who threatened to expose me the way I just exposed others." Minho's scarred hand found hers automatically. "The strange thing is how much more powerful this feels than violence ever did." "More powerful how?" "Violence controls through fear, which means it's always temporary. Fear fades, or people get desperate enough to overcome it. But justice changes things permanently. The people we've helped free don't have to be afraid anymore. The criminals we've exposed can't hurt anyone else. That's a kind of power I never understood when I was building empires on other people's fear." Victoria squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses he'd developed from their New Zealand carpentry projects, rather than the scars from his criminal past. "Any regrets about the life you gave up?" "None. Well, almost none." Minho smiled with the self-awareness that had replaced his former arrogance. "I sometimes miss the certainty of knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. Being a good person requires constant decision-making in ways that being a criminal didn't." "How so?" "Criminals have simple rules. Take what you want, protect what's yours, eliminate threats before they eliminate you. Good people have to weigh competing values: help versus harm, justice versus mercy, individual needs versus collective good. It's mentally exhausting in ways I hadn't anticipated." Victoria laughed, the sound carrying across the memorial's reflecting pool. "Welcome to the human condition. The rest of us have been figuring it out as we go along for centuries. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest. Moral people don't have all the answers. They just keep choosing to ask the right questions." They walked in comfortable silence toward their temporary home, past monuments to leaders who had faced similar choices between easy power and difficult justice. Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from Director Chen. "New case briefing tomorrow. Art forgery ring with connections to forced labor in Eastern Europe. Interested?" Victoria showed the message to Minho, who read it with the focused attention that meant his analytical mind was already processing possibilities. "Interested?" she asked. "Always. But I want to go home first. Real home, not this operational apartment." Victoria understood. Their New Zealand cottage had become more than sanctuary. It was where they remembered who they were beneath their professional personas, where they reconnected with the simple love that had survived impossible circumstances. 2 weeks, she decided. We finish this testimony cycle, then we take 2 weeks in Milford Sound to remember why we do this work. And after that, We save more people and catch more criminals and keep choosing justice over comfort until we're too old to travel or too tired to fight. Minho stopped walking and turned to face her fully, his expression carrying the same intensity that had first attracted her in Seoul. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd been a different man when we met? If I'd been someone worthy of you from the beginning? Never, Victoria replied without hesitation. If you'd been different, I wouldn't be the woman I am now. Your darkness taught me about light. Your violence taught me about peace. Your past taught me about the possibility of redemption. And your love taught me that some things are worth changing everything for. As they kissed beside the monument to America's greatest president, Victoria realized their love story had achieved something rare: transformation without loss of essence. They were still the people who had challenged each other across a Seoul ballroom, but they were also people who had learned to channel their intensity toward healing rather than harm. The work would continue. There would be more criminals to expose, more victims to free, more impossible choices between competing goods. But they would face it all together, partners in the truest sense, carrying their sanctuary with them wherever justice demanded their presence. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning as Victoria and Minho tended their New Zealand garden, 3 years and countless successful operations after their first congressional testimony. Director Chen's voice carried an urgency that made both of them abandon their tomato plants immediately. "We have a situation in Seoul," she began without preamble. Choi So-young has been released from prison after serving a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations. She's demanding to meet with both of you, claiming she has information about a new criminal network that specifically targets former undercover operatives. Victoria felt ice form in her veins. So-young's imprisonment had provided psychological safety that allowed them to operate globally without constantly watching for personal vendettas. Her release reopened wounds that had barely finished healing. "What kind of information?" Minho asked, his voice carrying the careful control Victoria recognized as his operational persona reasserting itself. Details about an organization called the Shadow Phoenix, apparently formed by surviving members of the original Red Phoenix Syndicate. According to So-young, they've spent the past 3 years studying our methods, identifying our operational patterns, and developing countermeasures specifically designed to target you two. Victoria exchanged glances with Minho, seeing her own concern reflected in his dark eyes. Their success in dismantling criminal networks had undoubtedly created enemies, but the idea of an organization specifically focused on destroying them personally was a threat they hadn't adequately prepared for. "Where does she want to meet?" Victoria asked. "Seoul, the same hotel where you first confronted Minho. She says the symbolism is important for what she needs to tell you." The location choice was clearly psychological warfare, forcing them to return to the place where their story began, where their love had first complicated their lives in ways that nearly destroyed them both. "It's obviously a trap," Minho said flatly. "Obviously, but it might be a trap baited with information we need to protect other operatives. The Shadow Phoenix has already killed 2 agents in Bangkok and compromised operations in 3 other countries. If So-young can help us identify them, it might be worth the risk." Victoria felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling over their peaceful morning. The cottage they'd built together, the garden they tended, the simple life they'd carved from the wreckage of their former selves. All of it suddenly seemed fragile as morning mist. "We'll need full operational support," Minho said, acceptance in his voice despite the obvious danger. "Backup teams, exit strategies, medical support, and legal protection if this goes wrong." "Done. But Victoria, you should know, there's more. So-young claims that the Shadow Phoenix isn't just targeting you for revenge. According to her intelligence, They're planning to use you as bait to draw out and eliminate the entire network of former criminals who've become government assets. The revelation expanded their personal crisis into something much larger. If So Young was telling the truth, dozens of people who'd risked everything to cooperate with law enforcement were now targets in a war they might not even know was being fought. Timeline? Victoria asked. She's expecting you within 72 hours. After that, she says the information becomes worthless because the Shadow Phoenix will have moved to operational phase. Victoria walked to their cottage's main window, staring out at mountains that had witnessed her transformation from ambitious heiress, chose you regardless of your preferences. We go, she decided. But we go prepared for war, not negotiation. 2 days later, they stood in the Shilla Hotel's grand ballroom, the same space where Victoria had first challenged Minho's careful facade 3 years earlier. The room looked identical, but everything else had changed. They were different people now, seasoned by operations that had tested their partnership in ways romance alone never could have. So Young entered precisely on time, her appearance shocking in its transformation. Prison had stripped away the polished veneer Victoria remembered, leaving someone who looked harder, more desperate, but also strangely more honest than the manipulative socialite from their past. Victoria. Minho. So Young's greeting carried none of her former venom. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, Victoria replied. What do you know about the Shadow Phoenix, and why should we believe anything you tell us? So Young smiled with what might have been genuine amusement. Straight to business. I'd forgotten how refreshing American directness can be after 3 years of Korean prison politics. She placed a tablet on the table between them, displaying photographs and documents that made Victoria's blood freeze. Images of their New Zealand cottage, their Washington apartment, their operational safe houses across 4 countries. Financial records showing someone had been tracking their movements for months. The Shadow Phoenix isn't just a criminal organization, So Young began. It's a revenge conspiracy funded by everyone you've helped convict over the past 3 years. They've pooled resources, shared intelligence, and developed capabilities that rival government agencies. Minho studied the surveillance photos with professional detachment, but Victoria could see tension radiating from his carefully controlled posture. What do they want? Initially, your deaths, obviously. Public, humiliating, designed to discourage other criminals from cooperating with authorities. So Young's finger traced across the tablet screen. But they've developed a more sophisticated plan. They want to turn you back into criminals. Explain, Victoria demanded. Kidnap people you care about. Force you to commit crimes to save them. Document everything for public release that destroys your credibility and makes every conviction you've helped secure vulnerable to appeal. So Young looked directly at Victoria. Your father is their primary target, but they've also identified your assistant Sarah, your friend Emma, even Park Jun-sik. Victoria felt rage and terror warring in her chest. The Shadow Phoenix wasn't just threatening her. They were weaponizing her love for other people against everything she and Minho had built together. Why are you telling us this? Minho asked. What do you gain from warning us? So Young's mask slipped completely, revealing something Victoria hadn't expected. Genuine remorse, mixed with desperate fear. Because I'm next on their list, she admitted. They view my cooperation with authorities as the ultimate betrayal. Helping you survive their plans might be the only way I survive their vengeance. As Victoria processed this information, she realized their past had finally caught up with their present, in ways that would test whether their love was strong enough to survive one final war. This time fought not for justice or redemption, but for the right to keep the life they'd built from the ashes of who they used to be. The Emergency Operations Center established in Seoul's American Embassy buzzed with controlled urgency as intelligence agencies from 3 countries coordinated responses to the Shadow Phoenix threat. Victoria watched satellite feeds showing suspicious activity around her father's New York office, while Minho analyzed communication intercepts that suggested the revenge conspiracy was larger and more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. 12 confirmed targets across 4 countries, Director Chen reported via secure video link from Washington. Your father, Park Jun-sik, Sarah Martinez, Emma Rodriguez, and 8 other individuals connected to your previous operations. The Shadow Phoenix has been planning this for 18 months. Victoria felt the weight of responsibility settling over her like lead armor. Every person she cared about had become a target because of choices she'd made in pursuit of justice. The irony was brutal. Their success in helping others had created danger for everyone they loved. Operational timeline? Minho asked, his voice carrying the cold focus Victoria recognized from their most dangerous missions. Coordinated strikes planned for tomorrow night, local time in each target location. They want maximum psychological impact. Everyone you care about threatened simultaneously, forcing impossible choices about who to save first. Victoria studied the tactical displays surrounding them, each screen showing a different piece of the conspiracy that had been years in development. What about protective custody for the targets? Already in motion, but the Shadow Phoenix has demonstrated ability to penetrate security arrangements. Your father is being moved to a classified location, but we can't guarantee his safety indefinitely. So Young sat in a corner of the operations center, her reduced status as informant rather than ally clearly marked by the federal agents monitoring her every word. But her intelligence had already proven accurate in ways that suggested genuine cooperation rather than elaborate deception. There's something else, So Young said, looking up from documents she'd been reviewing. The Shadow Phoenix isn't just targeting people you love. They're targeting the legal foundations of every conviction you've helped secure. What do you mean? Victoria asked. Evidence tampering, witness intimidation, procedural challenges based on your operational methods. They want to create a legal cascade that frees every criminal you've helped convict, while simultaneously destroying your credibility as witnesses. Minho's scarred hand clenched involuntarily. How many convictions? 47 major cases over 3 years. If they succeed in discrediting your testimony, hundreds of criminals could be released on appeal, and thousands of trafficking victims could lose their justice. The scope of potential damage expanded Victoria's understanding of what they were fighting for. This wasn't just personal revenge. It was an attack on the entire system of justice they'd helped build through their cooperation with law enforcement. Recommendations? Victoria asked Director Chen. Protective operations for all targets, enhanced security for ongoing legal proceedings, and... Chen paused with obvious reluctance. Consideration of removing you both from active operations permanently. Absolutely not, Victoria and Minho replied simultaneously. Victoria, Minho, you've become liabilities. Your effectiveness as operatives is compromised by the Shadow Phoenix's focus on you personally. The smart move is protective custody for both of you until this threat is neutralized. Victoria felt rebellion flaring in her chest. The smart move is using ourselves as bait to draw out the Shadow Phoenix completely. Let them think they're winning, then destroy them when they overextend. Too risky. If something goes wrong with the current plan, 47 cases get overturned and hundreds of criminals go free, Minho interrupted. If something goes wrong with Victoria's plan, we die, but the legal framework we've helped build remains intact. You're talking about suicide missions. We're talking about accepting risk in proportion to stakes, Victoria corrected. Our lives against the freedom of every person we've helped rescue over 3 years. That's not a difficult calculation. Director Chen's expression carried the conflict of someone weighing personal loyalty against operational necessity. What exactly are you proposing? Victoria and Minho exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that had developed over 3 years of partnership in impossible situations. We make ourselves irresistible targets, Victoria said. Public appearances, predictable patterns, obvious vulnerabilities. Force the Shadow Phoenix to commit their resources to capturing us instead of dispersing their efforts across 12 different targets. And when they succeed in capturing you? Minho smiled with the cold calculation that Victoria still found both terrifying and reassuring. They won't succeed, because we'll be ready for them in ways they can't anticipate. As plans crystallized around them, Victoria realized they were about to gamble everything they'd built together on one final confrontation with the darkness they'd spent 3 years fighting, and that the stakes had never been higher or more personal. The trap was set with surgical precision across Seoul's most public venues. Victoria and Minho spent the following day making themselves visible at the hotel where their story began, the restaurant where they'd first kissed, the courthouse where they'd testified against So Young 3 years earlier. Every appearance was calculated to appear careless, while actually being surrounded by invisible protective networks. "Movement on the north perimeter," came the voice through Victoria's nearly invisible earpiece as she and Minho shared lunch at a sidewalk cafe in Gangnam. 4 vehicles. Professional formation. Closing on your position. Victoria's pulse accelerated, but she maintained her casual conversation about art authentication methods, while Minho signaled their readiness to spring the counter-trap they'd spent 18 hours preparing. "Remember," Minho murmured, as black sedans began boxing in their location. "Whatever they do to separate us, whatever threats they make, we stick to the plan. No improvisation, no heroic gestures." "I love you too," Victoria replied, knowing these might be their last private words for a very long time. The kidnapping happened with textbook precision. Masked operatives, tranquilizer darts, professional efficiency that left no room for resistance. Victoria's last conscious thought was satisfaction that everything was proceeding exactly as anticipated. She woke in a warehouse that could have been transplanted from their previous encounters with Seoul's criminal underground. Minho was zip-tied to a chair across from her, apparently still unconscious, while figures in expensive suits arranged equipment that suggested a very public finale to their capture. "Ms. Hamilton," a voice spoke in accented English from the shadows beyond the harsh lighting. "Mr. Kang, welcome to your final performance." Victoria focused on her breathing, on staying calm, on trusting that the tracking devices sewn into their clothing were transmitting their location to teams that would arrive in exactly 43 minutes according to their operational timeline. "You've caused considerable expense and inconvenience over the past 3 years," the voice continued as its owner stepped into the light. A man in his 50s, Korean, carrying himself with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute control. "The Shadow Phoenix represents the consolidated interests of everyone whose lives you've disrupted through your cooperation with law enforcement." "Let me guess," Victoria said, testing her restraints and finding them professionally applied. "You want us to confess that our testimony was fabricated, that the evidence we provided was manufactured, that the criminals we helped convict were actually innocent businessmen?" "Oh, we want much more than that." The man smiled with vicious anticipation. "We want you to commit new crimes, on camera. Crimes serious enough to discredit every case you've ever been involved in." Minho stirred in his chair, his consciousness returning with the careful control Victoria recognized as his operational persona fully engaged. "What kind of crimes?" "Murder, initially. We have a former associate of yours, Ms. Hamilton, someone who helped with your Seoul investigation 3 years ago. Killing him will demonstrate that your supposed commitment to justice was always a facade for personal vengeance. Victoria felt ice form in her veins as Park Jun-sik was dragged into the light, bloodied but alive, his eyes meeting hers with the same loyal determination that had characterized their entire relationship. "No," she said simply. "No?" The Shadow Phoenix leader laughed with genuine amusement. "Ms. Hamilton, you seem to misunderstand your situation. You will kill Mr. Park, or we will kill 12 people you care about, starting with your father and ending with random civilians chosen specifically to demonstrate that your cooperation with authorities creates danger for innocent people." Victoria looked at Park, seeing in his battered face the same resolve that had led him to warn her about Minho's true nature 3 years earlier. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. Permission, absolution, and encouragement to do whatever was necessary to protect others. "I won't kill him," Victoria said clearly, "and neither will Minho. You can threaten whoever you want, but we won't become the monsters you need us to be to discredit our testimony." The Shadow Phoenix leader's expression shifted from amusement to genuine anger. "Then everyone you love dies, starting now." He raised a gun toward Park's head, and Victoria felt time slow to crystalline clarity as she realized their carefully planned operation had just encountered a variable no one had anticipated: her absolute refusal to compromise her principles, even to save the people she loved most. But as the gunshot echoed through the warehouse, Victoria saw that it hadn't come from the Shadow Phoenix leader's weapon. Instead, he crumpled to the floor as tactical teams poured through entrances she hadn't seen. Their arrival perfectly timed to the moment when the criminals had revealed their complete plans on camera. "About time," Minho said calmly as federal agents cut through his restraints. "I was starting to worry our backup had gotten lost." Victoria stared at him in amazement. "You knew? You knew they were here?" "I knew they would be here exactly when we needed them to be here. The question was whether we could survive long enough for them to get the complete confession on camera." Minho helped Park to his feet, checking his injuries with the careful attention of someone who understood violence intimately. "The Shadow Phoenix just admitted to planning the murder of federal witnesses. That's a death penalty case in multiple jurisdictions." As chaos resolved into the controlled efficiency of law enforcement processing a major bust, Victoria realized they'd just survived their final confrontation with the criminal underworld that had defined their early relationship. The Shadow Phoenix's plan to destroy them had instead provided evidence that would ensure none of their previous cases could ever be successfully appealed. But more importantly, they'd proven to themselves that their love was strong enough to choose principle over survival, that their partnership had evolved beyond romance into something unbreakable by external threats. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the rose garden behind their New Zealand cottage, watching Minho teach carpentry skills to a group of former trafficking victims who'd been relocated to their area as part of a witness protection program. The sight of him patiently guiding traumatized survivors through the healing process of creating something beautiful with their own hands never failed to move her. Their official work with international law enforcement had concluded with the Shadow Phoenix trials. 47 major criminal convictions had been upheld on appeal. Hundreds of traffickers remained in prison, and thousands of victims had received the justice they deserved. But more importantly, Victoria and Minho had discovered that their most meaningful work happened in quiet moments like these, helping individual people rebuild lives shattered by others' violence. Mrs. Kim, one of their students, a young woman named Anna who'd been rescued from a trafficking ring in Barcelona, approached with a jewelry box she'd crafted from local wood. "I finished the project you suggested." Victoria examined Anna's work with the appreciation she'd developed for craftsmanship during their years in New Zealand. "It's beautiful. Your mother will treasure it." She doesn't know I'm alive yet, Anna admitted. I haven't been ready to contact my family since everything that happened. But working with wood, creating something good with the same hands that were used for terrible things, it makes me feel human again. Victoria understood. She'd watched dozens of survivors work through their trauma using the same patient methods that had helped her and Minho heal from their own difficult pasts. Creating beauty from raw materials, building useful objects with their own skills, learning that their hands could nurture instead of just surviving. All of it contributed to psychological healing that traditional therapy alone couldn't provide. Minho joined them as Anna returned to her workbench, his expression carrying the peace that Victoria had come to associate with their life away from operational pressures. Director Chen called, he said. The Bangkok trafficking network we helped expose last year has been completely dismantled. 87 victims recovered, 23 criminals convicted, and the financial pipelines disrupted permanently. How do you feel about that? Satisfied. Useful. Like the work we're doing here matters as much as the cases that make headlines. Minho's scarred hand found hers automatically, the gesture so natural now that Victoria rarely noticed it consciously. But I've been thinking about something Anna said yesterday, about feeling ready to contact her family. Victoria felt her pulse quicken slightly. They'd both been avoiding the question of reconnecting with people from their former lives, content to build their sanctuary in isolation from the complications of their pasts. What did she say? That healing means learning to love without fear again. Not just loving people who are safe, but loving people who might hurt you or disappoint you or ask difficult things of you. Minho looked toward the cottage where other survivors worked on various projects. I think maybe we've been hiding from our own healing by avoiding everyone except each other. Victoria considered his words as she watched Anna sand the jewelry box with careful attention to detail. The young woman's confidence had grown remarkably over the 6 months she'd been with them. But the real transformation had come when she decided to risk vulnerability by creating something specifically for her mother. You want to contact your mother, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. I want to stop being afraid of her disappointment. I want to find out if love can survive complete honesty about who I've been and who I'm trying to become. Victoria felt her own parallel desires stirring. Conversations with her father that went beyond operational debriefings. Friendships that didn't require security clearances. The simple pleasure of sharing their New Zealand life with people who cared about them personally rather than professionally. It would mean visitors. Questions. People who knew us when we were different people. It would also mean not spending the rest of our lives as refugees from our own families. Victoria walked to the garden's edge, where she could see across the valley that had become their sanctuary. The landscape stretched toward mountains that had watched over their transformation from damaged people seeking healing into whole people capable of helping others heal. What if they can't accept who we are now? What if the people we love can't reconcile the criminals and investigators we used to be with the teachers and craftspeople we've become? Minho joined her at the garden's boundary, his presence steady and reassuring as always. Then we'll know we tried, and we'll still have each other, and this place, and the work that gives our lives meaning. Victoria thought about the jewelry box Anna was creating for a mother who didn't know her daughter was alive. The courage required to reach across years of silence and trauma, to risk rejection in pursuit of love. It was the same courage she and Minho had needed to survive everything they'd faced together. Okay, she decided. But we do it gradually, carefully, with the same planning we used for our most dangerous operations. Agreed. And Victoria? Yes? Whatever happens, whatever complications this creates, we face them together. Partners in everything, remember? Partners in everything. Victoria confirmed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of new beginnings and hard-earned hope. As evening painted the New Zealand sky in shades of gold and rose, Victoria realized they were about to embark on their most dangerous mission yet, learning to love without limits, to trust without guarantees, and to build a future that honored their past while refusing to be imprisoned by it. 1 year later, Victoria stood in the Shilla Hotel's grand ballroom, the same space where she'd first challenged Minho 4 years earlier, surrounded by 3 generations of Hamilton and Kang family members who'd gathered for a celebration no one could have imagined when their story began. Matriarch Kang Hye-jin, now 79 but still formidable in traditional hanbok, raised her glass of champagne toward the couple at the center of the gathering. To my son, who learned that true strength comes from choosing love over fear, and to the woman who taught him that redemption is always possible for those brave enough to seek it. James Hamilton, standing beside his new Korean counterpart with obvious mutual respect, added his own toast. To Victoria and Minho, who proved that love can transform anything, including international criminal investigations, witness protection programs, and apparently the diplomatic relations between our 2 countries. The laughter that filled the ballroom carried joy that had been hard-earned through years of impossible choices and dangerous truths. Victoria looked around the room at faces that represented the full complexity of their journey. Park Jun-sik, now running a legitimate security consulting firm. Anna, and 3 other trafficking survivors who'd become part of their extended New Zealand family. Director Chen and her team, who'd remained friends long after their official partnership ended. Even So Young, whose prison sentence had been commuted to community service working with other criminal justice reform programs. "Speech!" someone called from the crowd, and Victoria felt the familiar flutter of performance anxiety that had never quite disappeared despite years of testimony and congressional hearings. Minho squeezed her hand encouragingly. "Together?" he suggested. "Together," she agreed. They moved to the front of the ballroom, and Victoria felt the surreal symmetry of standing in the exact spot where she'd accused Minho of money laundering 4 years earlier. The woman who'd spoken those words seemed like someone from another lifetime, ambitious, driven, seeking justice without understanding its true cost or complexity. 4 years ago, Victoria began, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled guests. "I stood in this room and called Minho a criminal. I was right, but I was also completely wrong about what that meant. She was right that I'd built my life on violence and deception," Minho continued, his calm authority commanding attention from every person in the room. "But she was wrong in thinking that's all I could ever be. People aren't defined by their worst moments. They're defined by their willingness to choose better moments when given the chance." Victoria felt tears threatening as she looked out at faces that represented every stage of their transformation. We've learned that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about choosing to become better people together and helping each other heal from whatever made us imperfect in the first place. We've also learned, Minho added with a smile that carried 4 years of hard-earned wisdom, that redemption isn't a destination you reach. It's a choice you make every day to use your experience, even your worst experiences, to create something good in the world. Applause filled the ballroom, but Victoria barely heard it over the sound of her own heartbeat as she realized they'd just completed a circle that began with accusation and suspicion, but had evolved into love and mutual transformation. As the formal celebration continued around them, Victoria and Minho slipped away to the same terrace where they'd first begun to understand each other, beyond their initial roles as investigator and criminal. Seoul stretched below them in rivers of light, the city that had witnessed their destruction and rebirth. "Any regrets?" Minho asked, echoing the question that had become their traditional check-in during moments of transition. Victoria considered the question seriously, as she always did. 4 years ago, she'd been an ambitious hotel heiress focused on expansion and acquisition. Today, she was a woman who understood that the most important things in life couldn't be bought or built. They had to be chosen, daily, despite fear and uncertainty and the constant possibility of loss. "None," she said finally. "Not the investigation that brought us together. Not the danger that tested us. Not the choices that changed us. Not the work that defined us. All of it was necessary to become the people we are today. Even the criminal empire I spent 15 years building? Even that. If you'd been a different man when we met, we might have had an easier love story, but we wouldn't have had a meaningful one. Your darkness taught me about light. Your violence taught me about peace. Your criminal past taught me about the possibility of redemption." Minho pulled her into his arms with the same desperate tenderness that had characterized their first kiss in the safe house. But now it carried 4 years of tested trust and proven commitment. "I love you, Victoria Hamilton," he whispered against her hair. "Not because you saved me from my criminal life, but because you helped me discover who I could become when I stopped being afraid of changing. I love you too, Kang Minho. All of you, the good and the bad and everything in between. But especially the man who chose love over fear, justice over revenge, and redemption over resignation." As they kissed beneath Soul's eternal stars, Victoria realized their story had achieved something rare in both fiction and reality: transformation without loss of essence. They were still the people who'd challenged each other across this ballroom 4 years earlier, but they were also people who'd learned to channel their intensity toward healing rather than harm. The work would continue. There would be more survivors to help, more families to reunite, more quiet moments of choosing love over fear in their New Zealand sanctuary. But they would face it all together, partners in the truest sense, carrying their hard-earned wisdom into whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. In the end, Victoria thought, as they held each other against the Soul skyline that had witnessed their entire transformation, love hadn't conquered all their problems, but it had given them the courage to solve their problems together, which turned out to be the only kind of conquering that actually mattered. And so, Victoria Hamilton, who had come to Soul seeking financial crimes and found something much more dangerous, a love that would remake both their lives completely. In a world where money could buy almost anything, and power could control almost everyone, they discovered that the most precious things, trust, redemption, and transformative love, could only be earned through the daily choice to become better people together. Their story began with accusations in a grand ballroom and ended with promises in the same space, but everything between had been the real journey. Learning that some battles choose you, that some loves are worth any risk, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is dare to believe that people can change when given reasons worth changing for. 4 years, 3 countries, 2 broken hearts made whole, and one truth that echoed from Seoul to New Zealand and back again. The greatest crimes are the ones we commit against love, and the greatest redemption comes from choosing love despite every reason to choose fear instead.